Not all superheroes wears capes. Some wear wellies. Wellies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the James Conway podcast. We have a tremendous guest with us this evening, a real upsurge in the quality, I think. He was found by Darren, an immensely interesting man, Tommy Cooke, from Ballina, who has worked in hospitality. He's been a publican, a restaurateur. He's been in management. He's an author. He's a poet. He has written and performed, I believe, 3 different plays. The Poet's Bear, a second play on Michael David called Let Justice Rise, Even Though the Heavens Fall. And now he's moved on to his 3rd play, which is a song for Palestine that I believe will be in the Ballina Arts Centre shortly.
On the 4th and 5th of July.
The 4th and 5th of July. So if anyone is interested, it'll be a very good play to attend, I'm sure.
Well, we're so far away from Palestine, but we're so, I suppose, sad to see the devastation that's happening there. I was reading while I was going through the David Experience. I was reading that in 1847, the Choctaw Indians, having been displaced from their lands in America in the 1830s, they sent $170 at the time, money they didn't have, to a people in Ireland that they didn't know. They didn't know where Ireland was, and a people they would never meet, to try and help the situation, the famine situation in Ireland. And I thought, geez, if they could do that then, surely we could do something now, even though we're far away. And with great humility and the humblest of efforts, we'd be hopeful that the people will come out and support this. All the proceeds, every penny that is paid to go into it, will go, it's amazing, for water in Palestine. They have no water. Water is one of the sources of life.
Yes.
They have no water. They have no electricity. Their infrastructure, their homes, their hospitals are in ruins. Their families are being decimated in a great genocide of our time. And we have stood silently by for a variety of wars in the Western world in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I think it was Jack Lynch that said we wouldn't stand idly by for the north of Ireland, but it would be a shame, a bitter shame, if the Irish people didn't come out and out of their silence and stand up. And this is wrong.
This is something that I'm witnessing as well. You have 2 different political ideologies in Ireland. Well, you have multiple different political ideologies, but there's 2 that are being pointed at the moment, which is the left wing and the right wing. And I don't understand how those 2 groups of people cannot agree that what is happening in Palestine is absolutely horrendous. So, you know, I think it's something that they might actually be able to agree on somewhat.
The thing, I suppose, is that there are a lot of companies in Ireland, American companies, and they provide an awful lot of jobs.
Employment,
right? Yeah. And that's brilliant. And we've always looked to America as our friend during the famine and after the famine. It gave Irish people opportunity. It wasn't easy, but opportunity for advancement over there. So we've always considered them a friend, but we wouldn't really be a friend to anybody if we didn't call them out when there is terrible cruelty involved.
Do you think the tide is turning? Like I watched Trump the other day in Saudi, and you know, it was where he did say, you know, what is going on there it is not good. That's a big thing for an American president to come out with, if you get mad, you know.
Can you believe a word that comes out of his mouth?
Oh, certainly not. But I think what's it called? Even so,
Yeah.
it's
I think
it's a thing
3
to
weeks
see.
ago he was putting hotels and hospitality industry,
Yes.
get rid of the Palestinians, banish them,
Yeah.
and whatever. I'm reminded of to go back again to around the David time. Terry Riley, I don't know if you've heard of Terry Riley.
No.
He's written a great book, The Famine Girls of Mayo. So during the 1840s, hundreds of girls from the west of Ireland, orphan girls, were taken without anybody's leave and sent to us. It's hard to believe.
No, I've heard of this.
Yeah,
And they were brought
sent-
to cattle stations in the outback
and
that.
sent to Australia
Yeah.
to help populate what was a convict
Yes,
colony.
that's right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, and their parents, what did their parents think? They were going to some place that God knows where.
Yeah.
So where are these people that are being banished from Palestine going to go?
Well, you see,
I'm just saying to God knows where. Do you know what I
yes,
mean?
yeah.
I really don't have much time for. And like I said to you before, America has been very good to my family.
Yes.
Okay, but we'd be foolish to have a look at these things and not to be able to say, are we in a sovereign country? Do people have the right to get up and speak? Is Ireland a sovereign country? We are. And God knows we pay dearly to be a sovereign country.
Yes.
So shouldn't we be able to get up and say, look, lads, no. If one of these countries had said to Hitler in 1938,
Yes.
35, no, you cannot do that. Maybe millions of people could have been saved.
Well, you see, that's the part of that history nobody wants to speak about.
No, of course they don't.
There was a lot of countries who were actually looking on with
It
quite
is,
a bit of
yeah.
admiration
Yeah,
and
yeah.
saying, "Oh, well, look at new roads."
Look what
and-
he's done, yeah.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be afraid to say it's wrong. And we shouldn't be afraid to say it's genocide,
Yes.
because that's what it is.
But it's the same with the famine in Ireland. It was genocide of a
Yeah.
different nature,
So-
so it was.
There isn't a greater sin on the planet than genocide.
Yes.
Why, in the name of God, in the first crusade, the Christian Catholic crusade, they went over, they killed, they raped, and they stole in the name of God. And in every war since, people have charged in the name of God. In the First World War, you had priests and parsons on one side sending them in, and you had priests and parsons on the other side sending them in. Do you know what I mean? There is no war is a futile, barbaric thing to way to solve our problems. If there is friction, it should create light and not heat.
Mm-hmm.
So if something happens, say like even in our own country now, like on Mother's Day, 14 mothers went to Dublin and protested, were about to hand in a letter to the Taoiseach. And without somebody coming along and saying, look, we'll sort this out, whatever else we'll do, the Taoiseach isn't here, but we'll get the Taoiseach secretary out to take it, and she'll personally hand it to him.
Yes.
It ended up with 14 mothers and something like 30 Garda ushering them into cars to get them off to and then being searched, not as brutally as somebody said, but searched. What were they searching for?
Yes.
These women weren't criminals. They weren't a threat to our peace.
No.
They have a right to protest. I think that sometimes there are protocols and stuff like that. This is what we do. But there's sometimes a bit of nous in that kind of a situation to dampen a bit of high spirits. is better than all the protocols.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that turns very quickly then can turn into, if you remember, in during the Vietnam War, young protesters were shot by American soldiers.
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's terrible things can happen when we lose our focus on what needs to be done.
But I think people forget as well, you know, and we'll say the period of the Troubles in the North predominantly started with the shooting of people at a civil rights march.
Yeah.
And I look at some of the protests now and how they are handled by the state, and I do worry that one day something could happen and there could be a heavy hand applied, and all of a sudden what you're doing is instigating an awful lot of people to despise the state for coming down on them very hard.
Well, I'd be a great admirer of the Garda Síochána. I'd be a great admirer because of my experience with the Garda Síochána. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'd be a great admirer of the young men and women who go into the Garda Síochána, because when I was a young fella, a light on your bike, somebody making a bit of whiskey, whatever, right? You know, that was the size of it. But the width and depth now of the law.
Yeah.
And it comes at a situation like that.
Yeah.
And you're some of these fellas are by themselves when these situations arise. And you don't know what you're dealing with. I have a friend of mine, we were involved in a project in Ballina, the Tony Golden Community Park.
Mm-hmm.
So we're building a community. This Garda was shot. My wife had taught him in national school, and he was shot doing his duty, taking a mother and a child away from an abrasive situation, a family situation, shot in the back. We're building a community centre in his name. We wanted something to be. We didn't want it to go away. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are 82 or 83 guards shot since the foundation of the state. We didn't want it to go away without something being left in his memory. So we cycled from Mizzen to Malin-Head. I was not a young man at the time, or said 35 of us. I'd say there was 15, 16 Gardaí.
Yeah.
And we raised. So we had a kind of a plan. We had to have the money in to buy the land on a certain date. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But we got it, and we bought the land, 10 acres, nearly in the middle of Ballina. So expensive land. And it's in progress now, planning permission, and it's going to be used by the Kilmore Moy ladies. It's going to give them a home. The Kilmore Moy Ladies Gaelic Football Club.
Okay.
They'll be the first ladies Gaelic football club in the 32 counties of Ireland to have their own specific grounds and clubhouse.
That's progress.
It is progress. So
on the note of the Gardaí, though, and you says from your experience, has Ireland changed in some degree? Like, I look at Harris as the commissioner of the Gardaí.
Right.
He doesn't have the support of his Gardaí. And I think under his leadership, we'll say, there's been a lot of situations where they have been used as the heavy hand of the state in cases that, you know, I don't think Gardaí should be involved in. So we had a podcast with a family that had a person who was arrested for the eviction case in Strokestown.
Right.
And what has since come to light is that the people who carried out the eviction were from outside of the jurisdiction and they didn't have the license.
Yeah.
And now there's questions on court orders and stuff like that. I go back to where I grew up in Ballycar in the 90s and 2000s, and to us, the Gardaí were not seen as imposers of the law, if you get me. They were kind of like our thing with them was if you had a large funeral, they would direct the
They
traffic.
would, yeah.
And if if someone was got dead, they would maintain the scene.
Right.
And
Yeah, right.
Whereas now, when you have situations like evictions taking place, and I understand they're there to prevent civil unrest or
Disorder,
that.
yeah, right, yeah.
I think on the training perspective, they need to be trained to be told, listen, we're not imposing this. We're simply
Right.
observing that there isn't civil disorder. Do you know?
And they're obliged to follow, like the military, they're obliged to follow orders.
Yes.
Can I tell you a little story? I was chairman of Ballina Town Soccer Club for three and a half years. We were building a clubhouse. It's built now, built in time and in budget. And we were next door. It's a fantastic facility. I don't know if you know it now. The Ballina Athletic Club, Ballina Town Football Club.
Okay.
And the whole thing that Sergeant Cyril Collins, who's passed away, was involved in Balik.
Okay.
It's hard to find it anywhere. It's brilliant. But the people from the athletic club, we had spent a fortune doing yourself a soccer pitch, doing it, sanding it, getting it ready for the season. And in the middle of winter, they were running, and they had to run around a long circuit. They were running over it.
Okay.
So we thought, geez, they could run. We said, well, we'll get them to run around it. So we put down stakes. So they'd have to run. They couldn't run on the pitch. And the people involved in the athletic group rang the council and said, well, it was all council ground, and said, so the lady in charge said that we had to take them down. So she sent down 3 or 4 lads that I know very well that were working for the council. And I said, you can't knock those things. Well, I said, we were told to take them down. I said, well, you won't take them down. And they said, well, if you say we won't take them down, he said, we're not getting into a fight over it, like we're only working for the council. And then 2 guards arrived. And I was sitting there. And I was going over to them, and I was kind of a bit annoyed. And I was walking towards him, and he put his hand up like that. He said, we're only here to observe. She rung them as well. So they nearly have an impossible task. They're a young Gardaí. They wouldn't have the experience. Say, all the Gardaí that I knew seemed to be very old when I was a younger fella. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And the difficulty then of doing the job that they're doing is the only person in a court who's not represented by a solicitor or a barrister is the guard.
Well, let me put this to you, because that's an interesting point on the age. Is it appropriate that someone of an age where they're freshly out of school can go for a job like that? Because I look back on myself when I was 18 or 19.
Yeah.
I had very little in the line of life experience.
Right.
And, I've had several occasions in my life where I've gotten a bit of a fight or that.
Right,
and
yeah.
when you look back, when you're older, you're like, I shouldn't have done that. I should have handled that situation differently. Would there not be something to be said to say, yes, we'll recruit, but you must be a minimum of this age, that you've had that life experience? Yeah.
Well, maybe, but I'd say what the people who are I don't know if it ever crossed your mind to become a guard.
No,
it certainly never crossed mine, and it's a tough old life. It's a tough old life in the regulation that's around it in general, but also in the regulation that's around it in the hierarchy of it. Do you know what I mean? You're always being told what to do, where to go, how to act. Do you know, all that kind of stuff? So it's a difficult job. It's like a lot of stuff. Are there problems? There are problems in the country, but we have a great country.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? People would say there are people who are living in the fillet of comfort, but their nature is to give out.
Yes.
There are people who have nothing, who are optimists and look out at the good side of life. Do you know what I mean? My experience is getting back to what we were talking about. And I suppose it could be a time now for me just to do a little piece for you.
Okay.
Might give you my
So this is a piece of poetry.
yeah. You've heard of the great Thomas Clarke and the bold James Connolly and other great Irish heroes down through our history. Their stories fill our history books. They are honoured in verse and in song. But I will write a few words of respect here to John Morley, so brave and so strong. When I was a wee kitten, my dad did take me to see the great Mayo team of the 1960s with Jinking Joe and John Morley. Jinking Joe was the blade's edge, John Morley its steel and its strength. And sure, if they never brought Sam home, they left me fond memories for my life's length. As a boy, I played for the Stephenites in Willie Casey's Ballina. A great character and sportsman. In the 1950s, he was a superstar. We reached the county final. We were to play Ballahadreen. I wasn't the only one who cried that day. We were beaten black and blue, fair and clean. As we sat dejected in our dressing room, the great man did appear. Lift your heads, young men from Ballina. Be proud. Don't shed a tear. And when I thought about it, what chance had we got? They were trained by the great John Morley, so never ever would be outfought. 20 years later, as I lay listening to my radio on my bed that morning, sad, sad news for all Mayo. And I turned into my pillow and I shook, deep tears I shed. Those thieving bastards had shot our brave John Morley dead. Now, if Clarke and Pearson Connolly died to set old Ireland free, John Morley died, like many more, to keep our new-found liberty. And oft I think about him. I see him still, in red and green. And how I idolised that man when I was just 13.
That's John Morley was the guard, wasn't
He
it?
was, yeah.
Yes, I've met a relative of his, and he, believe it or not, we were doing a concrete job in Limerick and we were having a pint, he told me.
Right.
I think it was his father's relative.
Right.
Yeah. Was it a robbery or something?
It was after a robbery. He was chasing the culprits and they were getting away and they shot him dead.
Yeah. That would have been the time of the paramilitary robbery. Yeah.
So it's a hard time. It's a time you can understand. The apartheid regime in the north of Ireland in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s was brutal. Brutal. And when you have something like that, there is going to be an upsurge against it. The scars of that are extraordinary for people. I mean, you're dealing with people in their lives who are going about their business. They have somebody involved in something like that, and they're shot dead, or they shoot somebody dead, and that affects the rest of your life. Do you know what I mean?
But on the, do you know, on the point there in the poem you read out, and the notice, the thieving bastards of that, is it not a case that they would have been men under orders for what they believed was the removal of a foreign power from their country? They came to another part of the country where, you know, it has to be said, the same things were not going on. They were, you know, if you take the north, you know, the money for the resistance had to be got somewhere. And it was a very unfortunate reality that you couldn't exactly walk into the credit union and ask for it, you know.
Well, what I'd say about anything, and I was trying to be explanative of it.
Yes,
When these things happen, terrible things happen.
that's right.
If you were say during that period of time, I don't know if there's many, but the other great horror in Irish history was the Irish Civil War.
Yes,
When you have a situation where brother kills brother,
yes.
sister kills sister,
Mm-hmm.
mother, father kills each other, for what? Do you know what I mean? God, it's.
But has there been a country that has somewhat cast off a foreign oppressor and it hasn't resulted in civil war? I think it's very common.
It is, of course.
If you do one, you get the other, don't you?
Well, what I was saying to you earlier on, wherever the colonials have come, either in South Africa, India, terrible stuff there altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, worse than here. Lately in Iraq,
Yes.
they've always left the seeds of civil war after them.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly by the people they put in power. I think in Iraq they put in the smaller religious, the Sunnis, rather than the Shia, or vice versa, whatever it was. But they always leave civil war after them. So that's what happened here. And you can understand what you were talking about, but you can also understand that people were trying to settle down the country after 800 years of
Oh, certainly. No, I see it
and
from
that
both aspects.
So, and we were talking about the guards earlier on. There are situations that it's impossible to come out of smelling of roses.
It
You know
is,
what I mean?
but you see, like I'd be familiar, one gentleman in particular, and he would be now in his 70s, and he would have grown up in Armagh during that
Right.
period. Very intelligent man.
Right.
He says, well, a lot of the younger people, he says, can't appreciate. He says, my mother and father weren't allowed to vote.
Yeah.
He says, if you applied for a job with the council, you weren't getting
You
it.
wouldn't know.
And he says it was a system of apartheid.
It was.
And, you know, I don't think the vast majority of people down here, because there are people in the south who view a northern and they say, oh, they'll watch them, they're cruel people and that. But they don't understand the cruelty that those people had to witness. And I know there's a move now towards a more peaceable society and all that. And I don't admire this kind of big it up, but was all brilliant. The truth of the matter is, it was horrible on both sides. We worked for a utilities crowd in England, and the guy who was over the yard was a former British soldier.
Right. Yeah.
I spoke to him one day, and I said, well, what was it like there? And he says, I was 16 when I joined, he said. And he says, you were basically kicked out of a helicopter in South Armagh and told, just keep your head down. And he says, I was surrounded by people who hated me.
Mm.
And he says, I couldn't come to hate them because he was from a rural part of England. All he could see was men in tractors and men in vans and thinking, why am I here?
Yeah, we were coming from playing rugby in the north of Ireland one night, and we were stopped. I was sitting in the front seat of the car, and the driver, they pulled down the window, and this young fella, he must have been 16, pushed this gun in through the window, and the driver put his head back like that, so it was straight at me. And the driver said, would you be the English army or the Irish army? And I said to him, would you shut up for God's sake?
Yeah.
Like, if the young fella got any bit of thing at
Trigger
all.
happy.
Yeah. So, look, that's the great thing as you get older. There are no easy solutions. The one solution is where force is concerned, it shouldn't be the solving of any problem. That that was where I suppose we're an intelligent nation, we're a diverse nation, right? We're becoming more diverse. That's good for us.
It is, but on that, what about diversity of opinion? Because as far as I can see it, Ireland embraces all diversity.
Yeah.
accept those who have an alternate opinion. Like, I've watched the last couple of years people who have had legitimate concerns
Right.
about their own areas being branded racists. And a lot of these people have lived in England or America or
Right,
Australia.
okay.
They're not racist. It's just that they are legitimately concerned about perhaps there's one hotel left in the village.
Right.
And that's where they went for Sunday dinner, and the leisure centre was in
Right.
it. And
Now it's gone.
now it's gone. And if they're to put their hand up and say, well, hold on a second, I took out a mortgage and moved to this area, and that was actually a rather large part of my decision.
Right.
And that's been stripped away. The government comes, and you know, all the parties have been guilty of this. Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin, they've all been guilty of this. They've said, well, that's racist. Do you know, if you're taking away diversity of opinion,
Yeah.
that's not good.
Yeah, no, I think it's the expression of it sometimes. I think sometimes groups of people who have legitimate concerns are infiltrated by people who have illegitimate concerns.
Yes.
Yeah. We discussed this earlier on. I think the government made a massive mistake at the start of the immigration situation, the latest one.
Yes.
I think in leasing the situation out to private companies,
Yes.
they made a massive mistake
Because they'd be concentrated on profit.
and didn't engage with the communities these people were coming into. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people would have said, "Yeah, we'd love to see them coming. When are they coming? And we'll support what's happening." But on the far side of the coin, then, when nobody was told, is it men, women, what's happening here, all this kind of stuff, then people's first thing was, "Hold on there a second. We should be. This is a decision for our community, not a decision for a company. We should be involved. We should be engaged. We should be included in the running of this." Okay, and that for a lot of things didn't happen, and people a lot of times will take out the worst scenario they can out of a situation, and the meetings were held and TD stood up. We elected those TDs to go into Dáil Éireann and to run this country. We didn't elect them for something like this to happen, right?
Yeah.
And them not to take on the responsibility of it. They'd say, "Well, what do we know about it? Well, what do these leasing companies they lease to know about it? They know nothing." Because if they'd known anything, they would have engaged the people in the situations, got them involved, either by a cent, a few bob, whatever, a FOS scheme, whatever it would do, right? And a big part of it was, we're the Irish. We need to make these people feel welcome. Well, who's going to make them feel welcome if not the community that they're going into?
But doesn't it show if you make something a taboo subject, then the only people who are speaking are the ones who have nothing to lose? So I look at Ballina that, and it became a taboo subject. So all of a sudden, the business people couldn't talk about it because they didn't want to alter their business left or right, we'll say. The politician didn't want to touch it because it was so polarised that they says, well, both sides vote. So if I take a kind of a step back. So then what you wind up is the extremes of both ends arguing with each other.
Yeah, right, yeah. You're right.
And,
there.
and you know, if you go taboo, that's what you end up with.
Yeah.
It's like I done a podcast before we started up our own podcast. And up until that, most people would have said, well, that man is anti-immigrant.
Yeah.
And I went on my podcast and I made quite a case and I says, no, I've worked with immigrants all my life.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-immigrant. I don't like people trafficking.
Yeah.
And I don't like people profiting on the suffering of others.
Right.
And that's a totally different point to, oh, no, you just don't like foreigners.
Yeah.
No, I've worked with Muslims in meat factories. I've worked with Jamaicans.
Right.
I have never had an issue with them. My issue is if you take a small rural village and you have very few facilities left, and we have to be honest, an awful lot of our younger people are leaving.
Yeah.
And how can I encourage someone to stay in an area and then say, oh, and by the way, there's no shop now, there's no facilities. Oh, and the last thing we had, that hotel or that, well, you can't go there anywhere now because it's a refugee centre.
So it was a badly handled. It was badly handled by the government. I think it should have been handled differently. I don't know that if it's been handled differently as we speak this evening.
Yeah.
If they've learned any lessons, I'm sure they have. But at the end of the day, and we'll get back to what we talked about before, there are 50 million Americans who claim Irish heritage.
Oh, certainly.
So we would have sent enormous amounts there. They wouldn't have had it easy, but it gave them an opportunity when they had no opportunity here.
Yes.
Right? And we should provide. And as we said before, one of my big problems with it is that the people who come here should be able to work, should be able to go out and do a day's work and get paid for it. In a lot of situations now, they cannot go. They're not allowed to go out. Well, sure, that's madness.
Well, you see, I agree with you wholeheartedly. My thing with it is, if you give someone the opportunity to work, you give them the opportunity to integrate.
You do.
You give them the opportunity to become involved in the community, and it's not the whole other thing. So, like, one of the things when we were in England, because we were working, we met the English guys and they says, come around for a pint later or that.
Right.
And, you know, we were accepted into the community. Like myself and my friend, we were at a Jamaican wedding.
Right.
Do you know, we worked with the man. His daughter was getting married. And he says, "Just lads, do you want to call round to the wedding?" You allow integration in that fashion. But what I will say, and I don't think they're thinking about it, if you take a group of young men and say, oh, and by the way, you're not allowed to work, and you're staying in this room, and you're not allowed to seek other accommodation because this is, well, that's your prison. And then you take a young man and lock him up like that. Well, he's going to loiter around the area. And then you have the locality, the local community, who don't see these young men working.
Yeah.
They see them grouping together.
Right.
And you see, what it does is it's not conducive to integration. What it's conducive is the one community observing another community and thinking, oh, no, this isn't good.
One of the great things that people would say about people is he's a great worker or she's a great worker.
Yes, yeah.
On the far side of the coin, there's the thing of, say, somebody who gets work, the respect that gives them for themselves.
Yeah.
To be able to say, well, we came here and we're delighted, but we're willing to work hard. And if you don't respect yourself, other people won't respect you.
Well, let me put this one to you, and I've often contemplated this. And the government like to say that they're the accepting ones and we promote diversity and all the rest of it. Well, the predominant population of Ukraine is white. They look similar to ourselves. They were allowed to come to Ireland. There was a war going on. There were refugees that came to Ireland, and they were all allowed to work. But we have a community who are from Africa and Arab countries, and what we say to them is, well, you can come, but you can't work. So there is an inherent racism in that, because the person who looks like you will allow to integrate and to work. And then the other crowd, you're saying, oh, well, you can come and we'll process your paperwork and all that. And another note on that is the Ukraine was recognized by most global authorities as one of the most corrupt nations of the world.
Right.
And we give, a country that has a very long history of corruption and criminality, and we say, oh no, you can work away. Do you know?
Yeah. I wouldn't, I'm a bit older than you, I suppose. My experience in life is, you do the best you can. You're not perfect, and you're no better than anybody else. And all God's children, the old song, all God's children have a place in the choir, and that choir might move around a bit, and it is moving around a bit now through a variety of things that are not they're not nice. we are a country today. We've come from the fourth world to the first world. People are fairly comfortable in this country. And particularly when we're doing the thing for Palestine, we'll be saying that, be generous. These people are being killed every single day. Children are being murdered and maimed every single day. An infrastructure of a country is being demolished every single day. Their water, they don't have any water. Their electric, they don't have any electricity. Gaza, I was watching something the other day. Gaza is more like a concentration camp than a country, surrounded by barbed wire, surrounded by large walls. And it's happening as we speak. Sometimes when we're talking about problems, we're talking about problems of the third world and problems of the first world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we consider what's happening elsewhere, what's happening here, I think that in our own lives, we should look at the positive sides of what's happening in this country. We have a fantastic young population. Do they have to go abroad? Leo Varadkar said at one stage, well, if they want a house in Ireland, they better, young couples or whatever, they better go abroad for a few years to get the money to come back and do it. But they're not going abroad like they did 50 years ago with their arses out of their trousers. They're going now with certificates and degrees, and they're badly wanted wherever they go. The American companies that didn't come to Ireland out of generosity. We have what they need. We have a young population, and they'll move when the time comes. They get it cheaper somewhere else. But at the moment, they're in Ireland because we have a young population that's incredibly well educated, and we're a doorway into Europe. We happen to have those two things.
You wouldn't be of the opinion then that the tax situation would have been a great incentive to those American companies?
Well, if you want to bring people in, like, so the idea...
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying,
yeah.
If you want people in, we went from... we were talking about it, myself and wife, the other day. When we were earning, say, when my wife taught down in Collins here when she came from West Clare.
The national school.
Yeah.
Very good.
And she was paying 60%
Yeah.
of her wages.
Yeah. I think that's a remarkable thing. With you would be of similar age to
Of
my
course,
dad.
Yeah.
And I remember, 2010, 11 or that. And the recession was bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't good. And I remember being very, very vociferous, as a man says, and giving out to him one day about the whole situation. And he goes, James, he says, it's not a recession to me. And I says, what are you possibly talking about? He goes, well, James, he says, I remember going to school with no shoes.
Yeah.
He says, you don't. So he says, your recession and my recession are two very different things.
Well, that's it. And you brought it to keep yourself warm. You brought turf.
I saw the
with you.
turf, yes.
Right. Yeah. So his things have changed, and so we mentioned it earlier on about history, and we'll get back, I suppose, to David. But it's so important. History now has been taken out of the syllabus as something that you have to do. We said it earlier on that yes, we're making great progress, but if we don't know where we've come from, how are we going to know where we're going to? If we don't know about the likes of Michael David,
we'll get to David in a second,
Yeah.
but I'm going to, and it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. And we had another man, I put the same question to him. The demographics of Ireland at the moment they're an amazing thing to look at. Of the native Irish population, the most significant group is kind of the baby boomer generation.
Right.
And that's you were my dad's age, who have seen Ireland come from relative poverty.
That's not relative.
Yes.
From poverty.
Yes.
Yeah.
From poverty
Yeah.
to a first world nation. Now, I'll put this to yourself. Is there a bit of perception bias then that, how do I say, in your eyes, the younger person's issues mightn't be as big a deal as they see it themselves because you're able to go, I've seen it worse.
Right, yeah.
And does that present then the difficulty of the younger couple who, as you says, Bradker says, well, you can go abroad and you can come back. So imagine I'm a parent and the younger couple is, oh, I can't get a house, and you say, you should go to Australia for a few years, come back, build a house.
Yeah.
Does that add to a disconnect?
Well, what I'd say the first instance is when you're younger, you tend to be more excitable about life.
Yes,
that's what I mean. Your blood flows quickly through your brain and through your heart, and whatever your passions are stronger and stuff like that. And as time goes by, your calmness becomes a bigger part of your makeup.
Yes. Serenity.
Yeah. I think one of the big things, getting back to what I said earlier on, this thing of not teaching Irish history to our children is for me serious, because we're only 1922. We're in 103 years of age, so we've come a long way in 103 years, and people would look at 1846. Through to say Michael Davitt died in 1906, through to the improvement that those people made at the time in their lives, which was, relatively speaking, doing the impossible, right? Taking on the British Empire without force.
Well, talk us through that, because David was an incredible man. And we had Tom Moran here on the...
Right.
And he just alluded to it a little bit, but what a life. And a life that's not explained to Irish students or that,
no.
You know.
David was born in 1846 in Straight in County Mayo.
Yes.
Right. At 5 years of age, he was... the family was evicted. They were to go to the workhouse in Swinford, but they wouldn't be allowed to keep the family together. The boys and girls would be separated. And David's mother, Catherine Keelty, great woman. Irish. We talked about the Irish mothers earlier on. What extraordinary debt every family owes to them. She decided no, she wouldn't let the family be broke up. And they walked to Dublin with the contrary donkey, her with the babe in arms, with no roads. Got the boat to Liverpool, and then they walked, children barefooted, 50 miles to Hazelingden, north of Manchester, where they settled with other Mayo refugees and eked out a scant existence. At 9 years of age, Michael Davitt got work in the local cotton mills, pretending to be 13 years of age. 4 years later, he lost his arm in an industrial accident. His mother, Catherine Keelty Davitt, was advised by the medical profession at the time to let him die rather than to live the life of a cripple. This brave woman went along and asked a man called John Dean, an Englishman, could he do anything for them. So Michael Davitt was sent back to school, to a Methodist school, right, in Hazelingden, through the efforts of this Englishman, right, and was there for 4 or 5 years. He got work then with a man called Henry Cockcroft in his post office and printing works. And many times during his life, he wrote or spoke with great love for that man, and for the kindness and generosity of the ordinary working class English people who he encountered, who didn't benefit from landlordism in Ireland. So he was growing up, he was going into the library in Hazelingden, and that's where he first read about the history of Ireland. In growing up, obviously, he was in an Irish area. He would have joined the IRA or the IRB at 19 years of age. And he was a very able man, obviously, in his life. He worked his way up to be the chief arms buyer for the IRA in England and Scotland by the time he was 25. He was caught in
What years will we be talking about at
we'll
this
be
stage now?
talking about he was born in 46, 66, 73, 74, no, early 1870s, 69. So he was caught and he was found guilty, and he was sent for 15 years penal servitude. Now, in Millbank Prison, where he went first, he was in a cell. He was 6'1". He was in a cell that was 5'9", so he couldn't stand up. He lost an inch in height. He was terrible food, and he was given the job of yucca picking, which meant really that there were these old ropes from the ships of the time, they were big, right? They had to be unwound into single strands, but he had only one arm, so he had to use his teeth to unpick this thing. Okay, so obviously, and he had problems with his teeth all his life, and of course he died after getting sepsis after getting his tooth taken out. In 1906. So my father would have said very, very dubious circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Neither here nor there. So he was in prison then, and while he was in prison, he wrote this kind of article to the Prisons Commission in England, and many of those his suggestions were on the statute books of English prisons long after he died. So,
and would this be about the conditions?
The conditions, yeah, all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Okay.
So through the efforts of a load of people in and out of the Fenian movement, politicians, all that kind of stuff, he got out on a ticket of leave, and came home to Ireland.
In very poor condition.
Oh God, yeah. But while he was in prison, he had decided that the only way that Ireland could possibly become free was by peaceful means. And the place that they had to attack the British Empire was the landlord system. So when he got back to Mayo, James Daly was the editor of the Connacht Telegraph, had done a lot of good work, much underrated and much unpublicised work for the peasants. Everybody was a peasant.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? So they joined up. David was really, really smart. He realised that if they were going to do anything, that they needed to be a national organisation. Starting off with Mayo organisation, and they needed a head figure. So he was quite willing to stand down and let Charles Stewart Parnell take the lead. Okay. And quickly they had a meeting in Irishtown, and then they had a meeting in Westport, which both Charles Stewart Parnell and Michael Davitt spoke. 10,000 people there. Peaceful meeting. And they came then, it was Canon Burke. A lot of the clergy.
Mm-hmm.
So this Canon Burke anyway, and they got on to him, and he decided he'd bring down the rents by 25%. And then a lot of other people did the same thing. So they started moving. Then obviously there was the boycott affair.
Yeah. Tell us about that, because that's a very...
Yeah, I didn't take much heed of it because I didn't see it as being important. It's obviously very boycott, and it became a word in the English language. He was an officer, and they decided to boycott anything and everything. They wouldn't buy from shops, whatever. They wouldn't have anything to do with these people that came to work in farms and stuff. And when they did come, when they sent other people to come, and it became a boycott became a word in the English language. For me, it's not a major part of the story. the major part of the story is how it grew, the Land League. So it became very quickly. Now, the Land League lasted, it's hard to believe, the Land League lasted from 1879 to 1882, 3 years.
Yes.
They got done what they got done. Okay. So they had 1,800 branches of the Land League in Ireland. 1,800 branches. The GAA followed exactly
The same model.
the model of the Land League.
Okay.
Yeah. And it became an extraordinarily powerful political organisation. And this time, David was back and forth to prison, this ticket of leave. So he was in prison in the first prison, and then he was in prison in Portland, which was in Wales, okay, a few times. And one of the times that he was sent back to prison, they were so afraid of him that they gave him the train that the Queen used, right? So that as it passed through England and its way to Wales, people would doff their hats. They thought it was the Queen that was passing by. Do you know what I mean? Incredible. So it came to a situation then in 1881, 82, where the British put 1,100 of the leaders of the Land League to prison. David had foreseen this, and they had transferred the funds. Now, the funds for what is not realised, the Land League wasn't just an Irish organisation. The Land League was an international organisation. There were branches of the Land League in every city where Irish emigrants went. The money that sustained the Land League, right? Money talks and bullshit walks.
Yes.
There was money that sustained the Land League, came from all over the world, from New Zealand, Australia, America, Europe, right? Britain, right? They took that money away and they put it in a bank in France so that the British couldn't get at it. And he was a smart fella, and he had seen that. Now, at the time, there were no women in politics. Women hadn't the vote. If a lady wanted to, even the hierarchy of ladies wanted to go to a meeting, they had to stand at the very, very back. There were no women elected in politics. But David realised where they were going to be, and he realised what the future was going to be. So Anna Parnell came back to Ireland, and they had a long chat, and she decided that she would found, between the two of them, they decided the Ladies' Land League.
Yes.
Okay. So they founded, now, it wasn't something that the Irish fellas in the Land League wanted to happen. Charles Stewart Parnell was totally against it. He didn't talk to his sister ever again.
Over it.
Okay. Partly because she was so successful. So she worked hard. She was put into an office in Sackville Street where the Land League had their offices and told to get on with it. She got no help. But in a short time, she had 500 different branches of the Ladies' Land League in Ireland.
Okay.
Westminster couldn't cope with the Ladies' Land League. They were unable to cope with it. They didn't know how to cope with it. And that's how
That time period would have been
1882.
Around the initiation of the suffragette movement as well?
Before it.
Would it have been encouragement for it, I imagine?
Probably.
Yeah.
So it brought about this thing, they couldn't deal with it. It brought about the Kilmainham Treaty in 1882, which was a massive change. Massive change in us being here today. It was the first 2 or 3 steps up the stairway to our liberty. So by 1914, Michael David died in 1906. I'll get back to him again in a minute. But by 1914, 316,000 Irish tenant farmers were now landowners, all with large families. In fact, those 316,000 Irish tenant farmers made up over half the population, and their families made up over half the population of Ireland. The Land League and the Ladies' Land League were pivotal in us becoming a republic. Michael David, the Land League in 1882, part of the agreement that Charles Stewart Parnell came to, because they came to him about it, himself and Captain O'Shea, Kitty O'Shea, husband, who Charles Stewart Parnell was having an affair with. They came and they decided they'd banish it. So for the rest of his life, Michael Davitt was an international journalist, and he was sent by some of the great newspapers of the time all over the world, wherever there was international injustice.
To cover it.
So places like South Africa is still recognised there, the Boer War, and the terrible conditions. The first concentration camps in the
Within the Boer War, yes.
Were the Boer War.
Yes, that's right.
Terrible situation. The amount of children that died.
I think it's an interview with Dan Breen.
Right.
And he's talking about how the Boer War was a pivotal moment for a lot of, we'll say, people who were Irish with a bit of rebellious nature, that they had heard stories about these concentration camps. And I don't think people realise the cruelty that was involved, to lock up the wife and the daughter and the man. And, like, let's be honest about it, the English were having their arses handed to them.
Oh, they were.
That's why they came up with the concentration camp.
So these Boers, they were farmers.
That's right.
Boers
Yeah.
farmer.
Yeah.
But they were also great shots, and they were brilliant horsemen.
Yes.
Okay, they could disappear. They knew the country. At the end of the day, the British had 250,000 soldiers from all over their empire in South Africa fighting this war.
Yes.
Against 25,000 Boers.
And they were losing.
Right, yeah. And so that was one of the situations he was in.
Was that the first instance of what would probably be adopted by the IRA, which is guerrilla warfare? The Boers did seem to be doing a version of it.
Oh, yeah, very, very good. It probably was. You look at a bigger adversary.
Yes.
He's bigger and stronger. Are you faster and smaller?
Yeah.
The corner forward playing Gaelic football. You know what I mean? Right, yeah. So, So he would have been travelled all over the world. In fact, he circumnavigated the world at the time on 3 occasions. He was in Canada, North America, South America, obviously Africa. He was in the Holy Land in Palestine. He was in New Zealand, Australia. He was in...
Tell us about his connections to China, because I don't think a lot of people would be aware of that.
So, while he was an MP, he was an MP for Mayo, he had been asked to be an MP for a variety of places. He turned them down. Not only in Ireland now, but he did great work in Scotland for the crofters in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. There's a big statue to him on the Isle of Skye. Okay, he was the first president of Celtic Football Club. It was he that went when there was trouble in the shipyards in Glasgow. He was the only man that they'd accept to be the person to help both sides to come together.
So he was the first president, and it would have been established by Brother Walford from
just
Ballymote,
down the road here.
That's amazing. So it is.
So Brother Walford presented him with a silver medal on one occasion, and he turned the first sod in Celtic Park. Michael Davitt.
That's an amazing history.
Yeah. So, yeah. But he was a founder member of the GAA.
Yeah, I was aware of that. Yeah.
So he was where were we? He was also a leading light in the labour movement in Britain. Mm-hmm. He founded the first labour newspaper in Great Britain, and would have been a soldier with Kerr Hardy, who would be considered the father of the labour movement in Britain. In 1905, he canvassed for all the Labour candidates in the general election at the time, when Labour was just a fledgling movement. And like right across Scotland, England, and Wales. All by train. There was no whatever else. And their membership in the House of Commons went from 6 to 46. He died in 1906, shortly afterwards. But there was a Labour government in power in Westminster by 1922.
Was it that soon after?
Now, so it's his involvement with. So you asked me about his involvement with Dr. Sun Yat-sen.
Yes, the Chinese connection,
yeah.
as the man says. Yes.
So he would have been involved with most of the leading figures across the world at the time. What do you call him? The President of the United States at the time. He ended up giving him 2 of these, what do you call blackthorn sticks.
Oh, yes.
They laugh about it, yeah.
Yeah.
But he was involved with Dr. Sun Yat-sen, was a persona non grata to the British Empire and was banned from Hong Kong at the time. He was somebody who was fighting for, not physically fighting, but fighting for the Republic of China.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have met. And they were of the same thing. Michael Davids travels as an international journalist. He would have been one of the first to expose the treatment of Indians in the United States. If we get back again to I don't know if we mentioned the Choctaw Indians.
Yes, you did.
We did, yeah.
So,
in the United States, the indigenous peoples of Australia and New Zealand.
now, there's another point that has to be made on that, and I have often contemplated it. The migration of the Irish people to America, I refer to it as the genocide, and in my opinion, it was a genocide. Yeah. But there were a lot of Irish people who arrived in New York who signed up to the army and then went ahead on throwing people off their land after coming from a country where they had no real claim to their own land. And I think it's
a big question.
It's a hard question.
It is.
Because there's a monument in well, it wouldn't be my local, I'd be from Ballycarra originally. But if you go into Ballymount, there's a monument to the Irish regiments in the American army and the cavalry and that. And it does beg the question as to say, well, did you really leave a country where you felt the landlords fished on the back of your neck and then say, well, listen, new country, new rules?
Yeah. I think at the time they called it the Wild West.
That's right, yeah.
And that's what it was. It was wild. If you consider that the most people killed, most American killed in any war was in the American Civil War.
Yes.
Right. Another thing, if you consider that the first president of the United States was English.
Yes, that's right.
Right. So it wasn't as if it was individuals, and even up to say the 1960s, people would say that some of the Irish had got up a level, they worked hard to get up to that level, but that they might have looked down on, say, either blacks or Hispanics or whatever.
Well, that's interesting because I was speaking. He was a Quaker, and he was here. This was originally an Airbnb. This
right.
Very interesting man, but he was on about the element of Judaism in America and how they're in the higher echelons. But he says the same accusation, he says, could have been levelled against the Irish people. He says because you've had presidents, you've had businessmen who have done very, very well.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, I've heard plenty of Americans say, Paddy done very well for himself here.
He did, yeah. Look, there are good and bad people everywhere.
Yes.
And I'm sure that we were talking about, say, the Ukrainians coming, or say, in the future, Palestinians coming to Ireland.
Do you think there will be a mass movement, or do you think it'll be a trickle, or what's your
I think what's going to happen is going to happen very soon.
Yes.
I think that America as a country cannot do what it did during the Vietnam War. It cannot have protests all over the place and try and hold them down. as soon as the body bags began to come back from Vietnam, like people, that's my son. What's
Yes.
he do? One of the things I was looking at the other day, Muhammad Ali decided, he said, no, I won't go.
I have no
And they
quarrel
said,
with the Viet Cong.
No, he said, no Viet Cong ever called me a nigger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when he came back with his gold medal,
He threw it in the
from-
river.
they wouldn't allow him to eat in the restaurant.
That's right,
He was
yeah.
have to get so great racism from once again from colonialization and the slave trade and the wealth that it created. We get back to David anyway. I might finish off his end of it. He had gone to this Dr. Sun Yat-sen. They become friends. He believed in the cause that China should have its own, have it be a nation itself. Do you know what I mean? And we said that they communicated in secret code. When Dr. Sun Yat-sen became president then of China in 1912, family members of his visited. In fact, more people visit the museum in strayed from China than from any other of the far-flung countries.
Really?
That's absolutely. So he was one of them that David met. When David was in Russia, he was over there in 1903 and 1905. The great Jewish pogroms at the time, and he was there to expose them and to let people know that they were actually happened. They were terrible.
This
Jewish
would be in
people
St.
being killed.
Petersburg, was
Yeah,
it?
well, terrible stuff. He ran into Leo Tolstoy. They became great friends, and they often talked about Tolstoy's book Resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Which is about the conditions of prisons in Siberia.
Yes.
And Michael David explained to Tolstoy about the prisons in England and Wales.
Yes.
And once famously said to Tolstoy, Leo, you have the ear of the world. Whenever you get a chance, he said, would you say a kind word for Ireland's right to its own freedom? So he was around. He was around a throng of great people. He was in their company. Do you know what I mean? He was considered much higher internationally then than he ever was considered afterwards in Irish history after 1906. You know what I mean?
Would he be flirting at that time with the connections with Tolstoy and then the connections in China? If you were to say, I want to sit down with Michael David now.
It'd be fantastic.
Oh, it would be a very interesting conversation,
Really
I don't
is.
doubt it.
Yeah.
But would he be someone who would have been favourable of, we'll say, communism? Do you know?
He
Because
was, I think more socialism.
yes,
I think,
yeah.
Socialism was a big thing. He was a socialist. He was a radical, right? And he believed. I mean, you're talking about a time when there was no Labour Party in Great Britain,
Yes.
right? The foundation of the Labour movement in Ireland. He was very involved with that.
You were very familiar with that period of time. From 1890 through to 1940, I love looking at it.
Right, okay.
I love looking at it. The leadership of the time, and I like to listen to their speeches and I like to read their books and all that. They seem to be men of so much higher quality. Would you be in agreement with that in comparison to some of the modern day leaders?
Well, sure. If you look at if you look at, say, the likes of, say, who have we seen? Boris Johnson,
Ah, yes.
Donald Trump.
Well, I'll tell you a good one about Boris. I seen him on the tube one morning. And there was this old lady, I never forgot it. She had an umbrella. And she kept giving out to him and the umbrella, and I thought she's going to hit him with it. She is going to hit him with it. And he turned to her and he goes, Madam, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
I will try to be better. And then walked off.
'Cause he was smart.
And I thought that's why they keep bloody voting for him.
Yeah.
He just takes it,
Right.
and he's a bit of a clown, and then he just says, I'll try to be better, and he walks off.
It's the easiest way, isn't it? somebody attacks you, don't.
Well, he didn't react.
No,
he
that's what I'm
didn't.
saying.
He
Don't
didn't
attach
counter her
you,
at
yeah.
all. And
So I suppose for me, the David thing became a passion then for us, and we had done the Michael David pageant for the festival when the year I stepped down from the
is
chair.
it the Salmon Festival, is it? Or
Yeah, the
yes,
Salmon
very
Festival.
good.
There I stepped down as chairman. We did the Michael David pageant back in the Steve nights at night time.
Yes.
We had 300 or 400 people in the pageant,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was about his life around the place. And then when I eventually retired, I decided I had written the other play, and I decided the Poets Bar. I decided, I'm going to go have a go at that. So we decided we'd do it for something at the time. We did the Poets Bar for the project I was telling you about, the Anthony Golden Park. And we did that one for, I think, some pitches down in this new Collins School in the Killala Road in Ballina. It was a great get-together of people, and there were a variety of people involved in it. There were teachers, solicitors. They were amazed at their ignorance, and I say that kindly,
Yes.
of the life of Michael David. They were amazed at the width, the depth of the life. And we talked about history there earlier on. If we don't know where we come from, if we don't know the heroes, the real heroes of our past, the people who brought us here, if people don't know who brought free education into this country, one man. He announced it. He was told he couldn't do it. He announced it in the Dáil, and they couldn't go back on it. And we have been the beneficiaries of that, and for time immemorial, the Irish people will be the beneficiaries of that. That every single child, if they want to,
Yes, has
should
the
have the opportunity. Right. Now, it's not for everybody. And today, if you're an electrician or
Yes.
a plumber, you'll probably earn more money than some of the professionals, like if you're at your business.
But let me put this thought to you. On the education front, we have never lived in a time where so much information is so easily accessible to people. Is there a danger in the modern age of education straying into the realms of indoctrination?
I'd say maybe one of the things that an education, say if you were dealing, say years ago, I was taught by the Jesuits down in Limerick in Mungret, and they would say, give me a lad at 12 and have him for life. Do you know what I mean? That if you get people who are young, right, and that's how it's done. I think part of the thing of education is to realise when, or to ask questions as to, is this misinformation?
Yes.
Is it wrong?
Yes.
Or is it right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to look in, because you might have information on, but there's information elsewhere to tell you whether that's right or wrong. The internet is a powerful.
Do we reward, however, that kind of critical thinking? Because in my opinion, we'll take a junior certificate and a leave-it certificate, and you have a marking scheme and you have the assignments you're given. So you're really marked on your ability to retain the information that you're given and then regurgitate it on the day, get as much of that on the paper as possible. So I always go back. We had an excellent history teacher in secondary school. McEntee was her name. She was a wonderful woman. Wonderful woman. But I remember it was at the Pinta de Nina and the Santa Maria, and of course they went, and Christopher Columbus discovered America. And I always had this thought, how do you discover something when there's people already there? And then archaeology through the years, what we're after finding out is there's actually a fairly good chance there was an Irish guy there.
Before that.
Yes, before that. And there certainly were Vikings in the eastern part. St. Brendan the Navigator is right. There's a lot of evidence leading to that. But there was certainly Vikings, because the archaeology is there now to prove it and date it. And I've always had this nagging thing of, well, if you don't stay up to date with current things...
Yeah. They say about things, it's the thing Victor Ludorum.
the Vics write the history.
But they also write the history books, okay. You mentioned something important there now. You mentioned about your teacher.
Yes.
A big part of...
the quality of the teacher, yeah.
But also the respect and the, I won't say love, but the respect and amiability that they raise in you.
Oh, yes.
For them, because they're such good people.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And that's part of it. It's not, but that's part of your education as well.
Well, we had several wonderful teachers.
Yeah.
Really good teachers. Yeah. And like, I liked history, geography with Mr. Ling, physics with Mr. Cohen, and McEntee was the history one. She was absolutely fantastic. And I excelled in the subjects that they taught because they were so good at it. And like my trouble with education is, I got to 16, I understood what doing a day's work and getting money was. My interest was gone. It was cars and ladies. But I still look back on it now, and I look at some of the things we were taught, and now I see the curriculum with my own kids, and I'm like, no, this isn't the same. I'm not sure if this is more positive, if you get me. Because when we were there was a concentration on STEM subjects, which was mathematics, reading and writing. There was a concentration on those subjects.
Right.
Now I'm seeing more of a social element.
Right.
And I can't help but think that's taken up some of the day, and also some of that young person's capacity to learn these STEM subjects. And then if you look at countries like China, South Korea, countries that are doing incredibly well, they're concentrating on STEM subjects. They're excelling in them.
But they're also, when we were in China, my daughter gave my wife some kind of a place to go to get her hair done.
Yes.
She said to her, Claire, she said, if you're going down the street and anything happens to you in China, all the young people speak English. They all speak English.
Yes.
So she was going down the street anyway, and she had her, it's a different system over there, but she had this hairdresser's thing, and next thing 5 or 6 hairdressers showed up on it. So she could go back home, but she was there and she wanted to get her hair done. When a woman wants to get her hair done, she's going to get her hair done. That's it. So she saw this fella and she said, "Excuse me," she said, "do you speak English?" She said, "I do." She said, "I'm looking for this hairdresser," he said, "but it's all over the place here and I don't know how to get there." And he said, "Well, it's not too far away now." He said, "Go down there, go down to your left, go down to your right, go down, go in there, and then you're there." And then he looked at her and he said, "You don't understand, do you?" And she said, "No." He said, "Hold on there," he said, "and I'll take you down in the car." Right. So there's a I don't know how many people in because that's where commerce is. The American, the British, all that. Everybody speaks English. You know what I mean?
Yes.
For our education system, and they speak it well.
Yes.
That's what I was so impressed with over there. Young people going to school, they didn't have massive big bags on their backs.
Yes.
Yeah. Before they went into school, they did what these famous golfers do before they play a round of golf. They spent 20 minutes limbering up, getting ready for what they were going to do. They weren't going in a sleep. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and they were, and to go out in the streets then of China and see them, right, enjoying themselves, and not sound or a sight of people being loud or being abusive or abrasive. Now, I know China has other massive problems, but I came away from China thinking we could learn a lot from them. We could learn a lot about organisation. The people were so nice. James.
But what part did you travel to?
We stayed 2.5 weeks in Shanghai. Then we went down to Lijiang and Dali, which are on the border of Laos and Vietnam. Okay, and we were there for about 4 or 5 days. We were just as impressed.
Yes.
We were just as impressed with these are heritage cities. Do you know what I mean? A lot of the tourism in China is from within China. It's a massive country.
Yes,
within
yes.
China itself. Do you know what I mean? But we're so impressed with the young people, and came away thinking, having been on the bullet train and having seen the infrastructure and how incredible it is.
Why do you think they are having this? I think it's called Ballina or something now. It's a rough translation in English. It means lie flat. My understanding of it is there are so many graduates of very high quality,
Right.
that there are not enough graduate openings of very high quality to accommodate all
Right.
of them.
Okay.
And you wind up with a lot of young people who have gone through the national, the secondary and the college, and perhaps even a master's degree after that.
Right.
And then they end up with a factory job and they say to themselves, well, if I cannot have what I was promised and strive towards,
Right.
I am simply going to do the bare minimum. And
I think.
why do you think they'd have that issue?
Well, I think the regime there for education is there is no place for slackers.
No,
You're
certainly
You're
not.
getting this opportunity,
Yes,
and you better grasp it with both hands.
yes,
Do you know what I mean? And I would say you have to realise they've come from a situation where it was one child per family,
yes,
and now they're trying to grow that.
Yeah.
Because like all the countries in the world, and we talked about immigration earlier on,
Yeah.
an awful lot of the countries in the world don't have enough young people to do the jobs that they need to get done to progress. Do you know what I mean?
Now, does that turn on its head with AI, automation and robotics?
I have to say, right, when I went up to John Maloney and Adele Maloney and started work in SuperValue, I didn't know anything about the internet. I didn't know anything about computers. Computers are something that you learn about the stuff that you really want to know about.
Yeah,
It's enormous.
yeah,
But you pick the bits and pieces that you need to have to do in your life, okay, and you put your head down, and after a while you find, and I was an ignorant, it's not that hard.
no, it's not that difficult.
Right,
No,
okay.
no.
So, and you get this stuff and you start doing stuff like that. I started doing HACCP in the shop, and everything was on the computer.
Yes,
Yeah, training, everything. So, and I'd say that this maybe is something like that. I mean, I'm of an age now where I'm not going to ever know an awful lot about it, and it doesn't worry me that much. It might worry my daughter had a child there 2 weeks ago, Megan, Conal Thomas. My wife's name is O'Connell.
Yes.
Conal is the O'Connell, and Thomas. I insisted I be put in there somewhere. Great girl.
I heard a serious quotation on it. A man who's far more intelligent than I am, but when he speaks, I listen to him, and
Right.
he says the trouble is, he says computers were complementary, AI is competitory.
Right,
was it?
yeah.
And I thought, all right, I'm going to
Okay,
watch
so
this
what
more.
so I'd have to put up my hands and say no. I don't know an awful lot about it.
But you're 100% correct on the replacement rate. Global replacement
Yeah.
rate is in terrible decline. So
there's a disbursement in countries, say in Ireland, when we had nothing,
yes,
we had families of 12 and 14.
yes,
We were a family of 8
yeah,
in Pearse Street.
yes.
Family across the road, the Mordens, there was 14 of them.
But it's a counterintuitive thing. As a country, and you can go back to all countries. You can actually go back to the Roman Empire,
Right.
because, I think it was Augustus. He put a tax on single childless men,
Right.
because it was becoming a problem. They simply weren't breeding. As a country becomes more wealthy and a better social system, you would think that people would want to have more children. But in actual fact, no.
Can't afford them.
Yeah. And
Can't afford to educate them.
yes.
Well, we had children to emigrate them. before.
Yes.
So there's places say,
But if you think of it on a logical standpoint, let's say you are tenant farmer.
right.
Okay, you have one child, and then the child gets to 6 or 7, and all of a sudden you're seeing the child picking weeds and being a bit of a help. You think, couple more of them are not a burden as such. When you get to a higher social strata,
Yeah.
and you're driving them to one recital and then another recital, and it's all money. Yeah, it's totally counterintuitive. Yeah.
I think the thing with the big families was 50s, 40s was a time when maybe the Catholic Church was more powerful than it is now.
Yes, go forth and multiply.
There's no such thing as condoms and stuff like that. You were only to have sex for the propagation of children and stuff like that. You know, people weren't as aware of their sexual responsibilities. Places, simple things. Houses were cold.
Yes.
People, you know, young people, relatively young people, husbands and wives in bed, right? But that was the most natural thing you could do. You know what I mean? And they weren't aware of the chances of maybe, or women or men aware of the chances of, in this cycle or that cycle, that somebody would get pregnant.
Well, that's a remarkable thought, because that's basically that central heating had an effect, and it did.
It did, of course.
Yeah. But it's the same. He's Peterson or that. He makes some very good points about women in the workplace and how period control and that had a big effect on that. Where you had products where, all of a sudden it wasn't as big of a deal.
Right, and even look at the ads now on the television. That kind of make me shudder a small bit.
Yeah.
But that's progress, and not male or female, but ability should get you where you're going.
If you were to describe your political ideology after a lifetime of working and study and the whole lot, what would you?
It's hard in Ireland. You see, we have. I'm thinking. I was a councillor for a while. I didn't mention that.
Oh, fair play to you.
Yeah. I was chairman of Ballina Town Football Club, and we were building a clubhouse.
Yes.
And I think we got around 150, 60 grand from the government in a grant.
Yes.
But soccer isn't like rugby.
Yes. Yeah.
People don't have the same amount of money. They don't have access to that. And I played rugby all my life. They don't have access to it.
Yes.
Of all the games that are played in Ireland, soccer traditionally, historically, would have been of fellas that were either unemployed or were in jobs that didn't pay an awful lot.
Yes.
So I was thinking about that anyway, and somebody came along and asked my wife, would she go forward to a much better person than me? Would she go forward for the Progressive Democrats at the time?
Was that Mary Harney?
It was
Mary
Harney,
yeah.
And she said no. She had a, and I happened to be in the room, and they happened to ask me. I knew nothing about politics. I never heard politics discussed in our house.
How lucky
ever.
you were.
Never. And yet we had all the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael meetings and all the IRA meetings in the hotel at the time.
Yeah.
The IRA came in as the North Mayo Historical Society. Okay. So there'd be on the same night, there'd be a Fianna Fáil meeting and a Fine Gael meeting. And when they finished, they'd be all below in the bar drinking.
Yeah.
And so what's the difference? Say, if we look at Ireland at the moment, would it not be the decent thing to do? Because there's no difference between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and there's no difference between them now today. When they get into government, they do the exactly same things. Yeah. Okay. So they're in government now, and they should join up, and at least we'd have a left and a right wing. And people could decide then not on what happened in 1922, but on 2025, what the issues are today. Do you know what I mean? And that doesn't mean now there could be another party could come up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think it's time to have a not just two middle of the road. And look, we're not the only one. Like in Britain, Tony Blair took the Labour Party and brought it into right beside the Conservative Party in order to get elected.
Yeah.
No, I don't. We have good TDs up in Ballina, very good TDs, and I vote for people that I think would do most, like all people do, for the area, the specific area in which I live.
I think a lot of the time it's down to the person and not the party.
The ability, but also
yeah.
they're a lot of what they do. I mean, going to funerals and stuff like that is all right, and I know it's. But where are you? Who are you listening to? What's happening? What effort are you making? A, B, and C. What's happening elsewhere in the county? How are they getting on? How are their TDs doing vis-a-vis our TD? Okay, and you're looking at a country whose TDs are now coming out of a young kind of professional politician, as against my daddy and my grandfather were TDs. You're looking now at a situation where people are stating quite early on when they come out with their degree, I'm going to go into I'm going into politics, and I'm deciding which party I'm going to go for. And we have a lad called Mark Duffy in Ballina, who's involved around the community. Good lad, well able to speak. He spoke when Joe Biden was at the cathedral in Ballina. And you're looking, he's young and he's progressive. Do you know what I mean? But the big thing is, lovely to look at you, lovely to be progressive. What's happening? Do you know what I mean? So our communities are probably driven more by volunteers, and have been. They call them volunteers now. They used to call them volunteers, say in a variety of organisations, whether it be sporting, drama, in charitable organisations, in a throng of organisations in the town. And I'm blessed to come from Ballina. We have a fantastic town. We have a fantastic amount of people who are involved in the coaching and stuff like that of families throughout a variety of things, including sport. Do you know what I mean? People.
You were, from your background, you know, in the hotel, and then you were obviously a very professional man who worked hard all of your life.
Right.
That would give you a status, in my viewpoint, of someone who is what I'd refer to as middle upper class, someone,
right.
you know, and you deserve to be. You've worked incredibly hard to do it.
Yeah.
Is there a growing disparity between that socioeconomic class and perhaps what would formerly be known as the working class, which is unfortunately now a lot of the time the unemployed class, so it is. Is that chasm growing?
I don't know. I'll tell you what, when I was in the pub business, when it came to an election,
yes,
and there'd be people in the pub, there'd be Fianna Fáil here, Fine Gael here, Sinn Féin here, and whatever they were, the Workers' Party.
yes,
right.
Yeah, yes.
But none of these fellas in the Workers' Party had ever worked.
I've noticed.
So
I have noticed.
So the thing is, I think the thing is, if you put your mind down to it, the barriers aren't there. I think people have to be a small bit smart and say, well, I'm not the most, maybe, and I can say that about myself, I'm not the most intelligent person in the world, but I could be a good carpenter.
Yes.
There's a very good living for a carpenter around here, like,
yes.
you know, or I could be a good plumber or a good electrician or a good tiler, or just throngs of stuff there.
Yeah.
And if I did, or a good painter,
yes,
and I could do, and if I stuck with, say, Jimmy the Painter for a year,
yes,
I'd say to myself then, well, I'll take job. I can be talking to people. What do you do? Small. I can start off with small jobs, and and what's that? That's cash in hand.
yes,
Yeah, I can do that for you. And then you get yourself a van and stuff, or whatever you get yourself, and all of a sudden you're in the business. And then it depends how hard are you willing to work.
yes.
Do you know what I mean? And if you work hard and get enough work, then you will succeed. You know what I mean?
Well, this is one of, like, I'd be familiar with a lot of people who would be referred to as anti-immigrant. I was referred to it. It wasn't the case with myself. But I have met people who are.
Right.
And really and truly, a lot of the time, it's sheer jealousy. It's the fact that they feel this person who has just came is getting the same as I am, and despite me being around here, it's almost as if they say, I should be getting more. When in actual fact, what I'm saying is, well, you've been here a very long time, and you've got every opportunity under the sun, and what you've decided to do is waste the great deal of them. But I do see a problem. There are some, like I meet some lads and girls, young lads and girls, who have came from, we'll say, the working class background.
Right.
And they're incredibly good people. It's just that they've started with very little in the line of opportunity. They might have came from a household where mum and dad didn't care if you had done your homework or anything like that. And then they're lumbered in to the same group. And what I call the middle class, the better, they don't want anything to do with them because they've came from this group. And there's no conversation, which is, like I read Dostoevsky one time.
Right.
And he was on about when he was in prison. He was part of this reading circle, and then the Tsar got a little bit jittery about these intelligent men meeting up and having ideas. So they had a fake execution for him and sent him to a gulag. And he was not from the working class. He was from a relatively well-off family. He despised them. And it wasn't until he was in prison amongst them that he goes, oh, actually, I thought you were just a pig ignorant person, but there's a lot more going on there than I realised. And there's, like, that's my predominant worry at the moment in Ireland is you have one class of people who seem to be going ever more this way, and then another class who are going more that way. And I think there's a chasm in the middle where there's reasonable people who should be talking to each other, but because the subjects are being made taboo, they don't want to talk about them. Yeah,
I'd say my wife is a principal school teacher. Just retired in a fantastic school in Ballina, College School, which is now more like a university than in the sense of the physical size, just a new school. One of the things that she'd have always have said to me is that when people were leaving, whatever their ability, yes, particularly with special needs people, before they went to secondary school, to open a door to make sure that where they were going, that they were going to be looked after, that these were maybe some idiosyncrasies that they had, to make sure that where they were going knew what her experience was. The other thing she would have said was, even when people are very, very young, to start opening the door to where they're going, not necessarily the specific place they're going, but to be able to see, and teachers to be able to see, somebody's quite good at this, somebody isn't, somebody's good at sport, so whatever. To look at those things and to be saying and also in national school, and for it to carry on secondary school, to give young people an ambition, to say to them, don't accept second best. You're going to be as good at the end of the day only if you put your mind down to it.
Yes.
You can be, I could have been someone, and so could anyone. And you took my... No, they don't take your dreams from you. The only one who takes your dreams from you is you. But if you have to be aware that there's very young, and I was a worst student that you ever saw.
Yes.
Okay. But I eventually sorted things out. When I was 16 or 17, if I really try hard, am I going to be I don't know if I'm going to be a millionaire. I have no job. Well, then, if they offer me a job in SuperValu, I'll take it, and I'll do a great job, and I'll have my eye out, right, to see, and people will say, if you're in a job and you're doing it very good, no matter what it is, sweeping the road, people will say they'll consider you. Do you know what I mean? They'll consider you for promotion, or or somebody else will come in and say, "See a man over there, yeah, geez, I'm short of somebody. Is he good?" And they'll ask, "Is he a good lad?" He is. He's a good lad.
Yeah.
And the opposite side of that, I'll tell you a little story. Barry McLaughlin, used to come into the pub to me, and we opened the restaurant with the pub. And I said to him, "There's a lady come in looking for a job." She was going to do the wash up in the restaurant. And he said, "She's brilliant." She said, "We'll be broken hearted to see her going." I said, "Right." Well, I said, "What can I do about it?" He said, "Oh, you're okay." He said, "Whatever, like that." And she came up anyway, and no names. She was useless. So I said to Barry, "What the hell?" I said, "What did you do?" He said, "It was the only way I could get rid of her." So there's two sides of the coin. Some people want to be in work,
Yes.
but they don't want to do any work. And some people, and it's focus. It's just you saying to yourself and seeing for yourself, if I want to be someone, it's not going to happen by itself. It's going to happen because people are going to try. And I've seen them. I've seen the people that I worked with that come in the door on the bottom floor, like come in doing packing shelves, and then went up and turned up at time and worked hard and got to the bottom of the management rung and worked their way to the top of the management rung, and then decided, well, and this, I can do this for a while. And then went off, particularly one lady went off and opened up her own company now, and she's a successful company, right? So, and look, she was exceptional. But everybody can be exceptional, you know what I mean? But you cannot go to sleep on your exception, you know what I mean? You have to work hard.
But is there, and your wife would be a very interesting person to speak to too, because I would.
Well, when I'm speaking to her again, I'll give you a shout.
Yeah, but when it comes to a teacher, and I've spoken to teachers about
Right.
it, they can pick out who is academically sound and who is going to get there but needs a bit of a nudge, and who it's a complete waste of time. And what I'd be saying is, at 13 or 14, if you have professional people who can make those judgments, because this is on the continent, they do this, Germany and Switzerland,
Right.
they do it. What they basically do is they kind of push them down the more technical
Right,
route.
okay.
And they say, well, Johnny is a big lad. He's a strong lad.
Right.
We're not going to have him in college at philosophy or something. So
Right.
there's a problem with block clear or plaster or that, and we think we could nudge him in that route. Everyone in Ireland wants their kids to go to college, and I don't think that's
It's not
wise.
no, and they won't fit in the colleges
I don't
anyway.
think it's
Yeah.
wise.
I think the thing to in discussing this is not everybody develops at the same rate.
Oh, certainly not.
Some
no.
people are very, very astute at 16 and 17.
Yes. Yeah.
It takes some of us other people to get to 28 and 29 to get the same kind of focus that you need.
Yes.
But like the thing, say, with the older education or whatever they call it, it's never too late.
No.
It's never too late to go in and say to you, right, I'm stuck in a bit of a hole here, but now I can decide, right, I'm going to do something. I'm going to be somebody. And a load of people would say to you, I was doing the buildings, but I didn't see it. And at night time or whatever, I went off after. I knew what this thing was about.
Yeah.
And I went off and did engineering at night time.
Yeah. Well, a remarkable amount of men after 2008 went from construction into factories
right,
and
okay.
industry and stuff like that. Yeah,
Can
I find you a very, very interesting character. I must admit.
Can I take you back to the emigration thing again?
Yes.
Because Darren would have heard this before. But when I started writing, a fella called Joe Gallagher from Tour de Strand, right?
Yes.
He was coaching us at Gaelic football. I used to play a bit of Gaelic football. And we were heading out to Bangor. And he told a story over, 40 minutes. He was driving. No, Claire was driving. He was in the car, about his life. And I always wanted to get the chance to recite it.
Oh, please.
Yeah,
I'd love to
somewhere
hear it,
in.
if
Yeah,
that's all
yeah,
right.
Yeah. So it's a longer story now, but anyway, and I hope I can remember it. He stood on the railway platform beside his mam and his dad, a stark and frightened figure, His eyes were full and sad. A blind leap into the abyss that was to him unknown, to leave behind dear Tourlestran that held his heart, that held his home. He was a big lad for 13 years, yet he was life's child. He'd never been to Sligo town, never mind the world so wide. Now he was off to London by rail and then by boat. All he was in this wide world was in his bag and in his coat. His dad had given to him 2 large 10-bob notes, one to buy a ticket for the trip by rail and boat, the other in his sock to hide until he got a job. If the London boys got wind of it, they'd ambush him and rob. The train's shrill whistle startled him as its steam did puff and float. It was time for him to go now. His chest was in his throat. Oh, Joe, his mother whispered, with a lonesome haunting sigh, the sound of which locked in his heart until the day that he would die. He wiped the window of his carriage for his mam and his dad to view. He smiled and cried and waved at them. They were all the love he knew. The conductor then in suit and cap opened the carriage door. "Sit down, young man," as the train had swayed, as he stepped beside the door. He scrutinised Joe's ticket, the destination he did note, and then declared, "Your first stop will be the town of Ballymote." As the train approached Ballymote, the brakes did screech and scream. He looked out the window at another sad family scene. A young lad hugged his mother till his dad pulled them apart. The young lad picked his leather bag. It was his time to depart. The young lad knocked on Joe's carriage door and asked, "Is that seat free?" As he sat down, he sniffled. His tears were plain to see. Then he took out his handkerchief and exploded through his nose. "I wasn't really crying," were the whispered words he chose. A knock came to the window as the train began to run. The boy's mother pointed at Joe, then she pointed at her son. As the train began to race, she kept pointing at the two. Miles had gone before Joe realised what she wanted him to do. So he plucked up his courage. He said, "My name is Joe, and I'm from Tourlestran, and I'm going to London town to get a job and be a man." The young lad then looked up at him. This seemed to calm his fear. Things mightn't be so bad if he had a friend to share. So they got to know each other on the way to Dublin town. Sean, Joe's new friend from Cloonacool, began to settle down. When a lady pushing teapot asked if they'd like something to eat, they wolfed down their tea and scones, an unexpected treat. They both sat by the window and watched the world go by, at farmers toiling in the fields, noting how the land did lie. Sean did comment looking, "If we had land so rich and green, I'd be working with me dad today, not in this limousine." Soon curiosity did them best, the train to investigate. They had a sudden urge they needed to alleviate. In a room named Gents, they looked in awe into the toilet bowl and wondered as the train did race where all of it did go. The train's relentless progress did both boys reassure, but when they reached Dublin town, the world would open the train's door. They decided that 2 young lads from the village and from the heather, with Sligo pluck, would proudly stand and face this world together. The bus, it had an upstairs that took them to North Wall. They watched the cattle herded on as night began to fall. As they showed their tickets, the man said, "You're too young to let through." Sean smiled and pointed at a couple in the other queue. "Well, young man, I'm an officer of the Customs and Excise, so stick with your parents. That is my best advice." "Thank you, sir," was Sean's reply, as both boys rushed aboard. A guilty, gleeful, downward smile was all they dared afford. Their first challenge having been overcome, Joe congratulated Sean. "I'd never thought of doing that if I was there till dawn. I didn't think. It just came out," said Sean with a quick reply. Sure, we had no tickets to take us home if we'd been disqualified. They jinked through the swarming boat and flew out onto the deck. Their fears evaporated for a while. They didn't give a feck. Then a giant cow emptied its lungs as the boat did disembark. Two lads looked back till twinkling hills had vanished in the dark. As the boat left the safe harbour, a storm did quickly grow. The ship's creaking echoes frightened them as howling gale did blow. They could hear the engine struggle to climb the mountainous sea, and prayed and crossed their fingers our two brave deportees. As morning's darkness brightened, the distant coast appeared. To be on terra firma was all the two lads cared. For all night long, as the boat surged up and endlessly fell down, they were so sick they thought it might be easier to drown. Two weak-legged, pale young faces disembarked at Holyhead, such relief to be ashore, not on the cold seabed, and followed the spilling crowd to catch the midday train, the last leg of their journey, for London town to gain. Passengers of all ages, their parcels, caps and shawls, quiet nervous conversations, and screaming babies' calls. Caution saturated, an atmosphere it did bestride. Asleep and drunk snored on the seat, no one would sit beside. As their train forged a trail through the North Welsh countryside, what would their future hold? Their concern they couldn't hide, for when they reached London town, they had no one to meet. How and where they'd live and work, or end up on the street. Joe closed his eyes as he sat there, to his God did make this prayer. I am leaving home, home into Listran, off into the great unknown, to become a man. No one to mind me, I am all alone, huddled in this speeding train, far, far away from home. My heart is aching for my dad and mam. Are they thinking of me at home in Tourlestran? God, please take care of me. I am but a child, lonely and afraid, from my home exiled. I am leaving home, home in Tourlestran, off into the great unknown, to become a man. Sean looked into his pal's face. It reflected his own fears, and lipped a little nervous smile, for he too was close to tears. Last stop, Paddington, a flowerful accent did declare. Oh, passengers, disembark, man, don't leave no baggage here. Our two young lads then picked their bags, breathed in deep and long, stepped out onto platform 5 to follow the rushing throng. Some were met and hugged by family and friends. Some looked around, then climbed the stairs to reach their journey's end. Sean and Joe tugged their bags out into the night to weary and lonely travellers, transfixed in silver light. A big black taxi stopped and the driver pulled his window down. He said, "For half a crown, I'll take you nearly anywhere in town." Then he shook his head and he exhaled, for somehow he seemed to know. He said, Bloomin' paddy children, I bet you have no place to go. You're right, sir, says Joe. We've come from Ireland on the train. If you could tell us where we might find a job, you won't hear us complain. Did you ever hear the like of that, says the driver as he took flight. It won't take you long in London town to find a building site. They both inhaled their courage, then out into the dark until their legs and arms ached. Then they heard the morning lark still. On they journeyed into the dawn until they saw a towering sign and sighed and smiled, for even they had heard of Mac Alpine. As workers arrived, they asked a chap who smelt and looked half cut where they might apply for a job, and he pointed to a mobile hut. Then he joined the other workers. They all began to smile. Was this the best that they could send from poor Green Erin's Isle? Joe knocked with trepidation and was told to come on in. A lady looked up from her desk. She couldn't disguise a grin. Well, what do ye want? Her voice was sharp and cold and severe. It's men we want. We don't employ young children here. Before the boys could say a word, a voice came from inside. Who is that, Lisa? In an accent even London couldn't hide. 2 young boys with suitcases. I think they're looking for work. I'll soon get rid of them, she said, with an unsympathetic smirk. Where are they from, Lisa? The voice inside did ask. Its intonation caressed their ears, its source it couldn't mask. I'm from Clonakul, said Sean. I'm the son of Michael Dan. I'm Joe Gallagher's son, said Joe. I'm from the village of Torlestran. A smiling face around the door did suddenly appear. Joe Gallagher, the blacksmith? His question plain and clear. Yes, sir, said Joe. That's me. But how did you know? We played as boys, said smiling Mick, on the high road long ago. Then a savage pull for home that Mick O'Connell could not ignore. He said, Lisa, ring Mary McLaughlin, I have 2 for room and board. And that drunk who makes the tea each day, you can furnish him his cards. I have 2 new expert tea makers, so give him my regards. They worked for Mick O'Connell for 20 years or more. He was a hard taskmaster, but they loved him to the core. He once told them of his parents, of their hard lives with great respect, and how to honour those lives every day. He'd always do his best. They didn't see him very often, but he kept his eye on them as they grew from naive Sligo boys to tough McAlpine's men. When they struggled with young men's troubles, and God knows they had their share, as if by magic, Mick O'Connell would appear. So when Joe got married, it was on Mick that he did call, to godfather his first child, that great honour to install. And on Fridays sometimes Mick would arrive with a block of ice cream. Before the children went to bed, he'd tell them stories of old Sligo. They listened to every word he said. On entering, he'd proclaim, It's Uncle Mick. I'm only here for the crack. And the children would run downstairs to see what was hidden behind his back. And they'd pull and drag and they'd tickle him. And he'd laugh till he was in tears. It was the way with their Uncle Mick for years and years. They all shook with tears when Mick O'Connell died, without a hint of shame. Joe and Sean helped carry out his coffin, for he had asked for them by name. And Joe and Sean often wondered of their destiny and the mystery of God's plan, and of their hero, no, their saviour, on that fateful day, Mick O'Connell, the man from Torlestran. Sinead? Now,
Absolutely fantastic.
So that's the kind of stuff that I've been doing since.
Oh, stick with it.
Yeah.
You might be on to something.
Well, we have the festival there. I'd be absolutely honoured if you'd come
Yeah.
to it and recite it at
Yeah.
it. It'd be absolutely
Yeah, well,
fantastic.
just give me a shout when it's on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stories of we talked about the John Morley one. Stories my mother told me about myself. Stories of coming into football matches. Stories of my own life going out to say leaving Ballina and going to Waterford originally. Those kind of stuff, and stories that people come into the pub and told me about themselves that were but they didn't consider themselves funny. Do you know what I mean?
Life is stranger than fiction, though,
it is,
isn't
of
it?
course.
Yeah.
And when I started, and I can only when I start telling stories, I can think of other stories.
Yes.
But if I don't write them down immediately, I'll forget them for 6 months again. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then there's bits of poetry about what I've thoughts and stuff like that. What your thoughts about life and equality and things that are important as you maybe you get older, or things that were important that you didn't really think about when you were younger. Maybe you should have thought about.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't. You know this yourself. It doesn't happen. You don't just sit down and start writing. I mean, I did a piece about my father's watch. I woke up one morning and I thought, oh, fuck. And I haven't with me now. And I sat down and wrote it in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But if I didn't write it then, it would never be written, like, you know, that kind of thing. And some other stuff then, I know Leonard Cohen famously said he had one of his great songs, he'd written it 500 or 600 times and over 30 years, that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Then he just wasn't happy with it.
Yes.
So that's the thing anyway.
Well, Tommy, it has been an absolute pleasure.
Right, thank you.
And an honour, to be honest about
right,
it.
yeah.
And well done, Darren. Well done, Darren, for meeting this man and asking him to come on.
What I did is meet him.
But Darren has been my tech, sound, light, everything for the two plays, and
You get all the good gigs.
yeah.
You do.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant show, and
Well, I think, Darren, you have the recording of the
He has-
second play on David or
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So anyone, if you make your way to Patreon, the play will be on there. And thanks for supporting us on Patreon. You help us to meet wonderful characters like Tommy and have lights and stuff to do it. And yeah, Tommy, thank you so much for coming
I
out.
enjoyed, and you gave me the opportunity to. I'd always thought I'd like to do it in Touristran. I did it recently in they have the Ballina.
Have you ever considered starting up a Spotify with your recitations?
I don't even know what a Spotify is.
Okay, we have something
but
to...
Tommy,
yeah.
he does do WhatsApp videos every now and again.
Like what I do
Oh,
is I
brilliant.
send them out to a crew of people that I stopped doing it now in the last month, but I was doing it for about 15 months. I tell you what I started doing at the start of COVID, because a lot of people that I knew that were by themselves and stuff like that, I started doing a song a day.
Yes.
So I have a sheet of songs, I'm 120 that I've been learning all my life,
Yeah.
so that I can sing. And then I started doing a few songs that I liked, but I hadn't actually learned. So I send those, and then I thought, geez, I'll send out my own stuff. So I started sending out. So it's mostly humorous stuff. It's that stuff that's a sad, but not a sad thing
think
about
that-
Tourist Strand.
That's a wonderful recitation.
Yeah.
And so many done it. Do you know, there was 10, I think there was 10 in my dad's family in London at the one time, like, do you know?
I met a lady on the street one day. She said, "Fuck you, Tommy Cooke. You ruined my mascara."
Oh, she was crying.
She was crying.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And yeah, because it touches. It's a touch for so many people. Do you know what I mean? And some of the stuff then is of a similar nature in the sense of its stuff. You see people that are a bit different years ago, and people kind of smiled at them, the idiosyncrasies and stuff like that. Now be white coats to be taken away and put
Yes.
somewhere because they're not. They don't fit the what we expect people to be. But there has to be space for.
Well, he was my best man at the wedding. I have no problem saying it, 19 and 20 respectively. So I can't imagine what it was like to be 13.
Yeah.
But we're 19 and 20 and we went from Rosslare to Fishguard.
Yeah.
I tell you, it's bloody hard looking at the island just getting smaller as you
fuck's
pull away. It's not
yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Tommy, thank you
Not
so
at
much.
all, not
And
at all.
what I'm going to say to everyone here, what we're going to try and do is tell Tommy how to do a Patreon or a Spotify or something. You need to have a platform of some description, so you do.
Yeah, it certainly would
Yeah.
be. And that, just to kind of put your stuff out there a bit more.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Yeah. So,
YouTube and stuff.
yeah.
And if people are around on the 24th or 25th, and where you're fairly close to Ballina here, and they feel like supporting the Song for Palestine thing that we're going to do, every penny that you give us, I mean, Darren is involved with the Ballina Arts Centre, and he is organised a deal with Paul there that they won't charge us. So all the money that we raise will go to water. There is no water in Gaza. To go to water in Gaza for those people, for water is life to a great degree.
Well, let's make a contribution as the show. Do you know? We'll make a contribution as the show.
You might come up.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I might sit beside himself though. He is the best. He is the best seat in the house.
Yeah, that's
I've
right.
been to a few things, and he is the
yeah.
best seat in the house.
But he's a
He's a whiz.
He's a whiz kid. He is. Yeah,
he's
yeah,
a whiz.
he is, yeah.
Tommy, thank you for it,
Okay,
and to
you're
all
very
you
welcome.
out there, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.